Jalaya, Part 4. Michelle grimaced. I remember. At the time, I thought you were the best of fathers and she was the worst mother in the world. It's you I should have been mad at, not her. Don't be. I'm mad enough at me for the two of us, Michael said. Now come, Defender. Let's get the discs up and see if we can bring our people home. We need to clear those raiders off the ridge. As he spoke, rifle fire sounded from just beyond the outskirts of the town. They ran for the stairs. To their surprise, Caroline was still in the hotel. She'd opened both crates and laid the remaining discs and sand runners in two orderly rows. Glancing up as they burst through the door, she stood, dusting her hands against the wedding gown's tattered folds. I did not want to leave without saying goodbye, she said. Michael just stared at her. Why are you wearing white? Was all he could think to say. Because I love you, and our wedding is long overdue. Besides, tonight is special. I don't want to wear just anything. But what if? Caroline laid a finger on his lips. I know it's 10 years old, and I know it's no longer white, but it's the best thing I have, the one thing that reminds me most strongly of you, and it's enough to remind my father of our pledge before he kills you when we get to the other side. Michael just stared at her. You surely don't think you're the only one to feel mad about me staying behind, are you? Father is going to want answers. And our son. She stopped, tears glistening in her eyes. Another staccato burst of gunfire came to them. Caroline laid her hands on Michael's forearms and squeezed gently. It will take an hour, and the raiders are close. I have to go now. Michael had no more words. His fear of losing her was a tangible thing, a night beast waiting to pounce, a raider's bullet seeking her in the dark, a sand eater's retaliation. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. I'll wait for you at the lower docks, she said, and before he could protest, she'd slipped out of his embrace and hurried to the hotel entrance. To his surprise, she drew back from the door just before a blaze of light illuminated the threshold. When it was gone, she slipped into the night, leaving Michael staring after her in awe. More gunfire had Michael on the hotel porch before he knew what he was doing. He came to his senses and ducked low into the street, relaxing only when he saw the familiar white blur of Caroline's figure hurrying toward the river. She's okay, he said, returning to Michelle. His daughter just nodded, her face pale, her eyes showing desolation. What's wrong? She didn't say goodbye, his daughter whispered. She just left me again. Oh, sweetheart, Michael said. Come here. He hugged his daughter while she silently wept, releasing her when she gave one final sniff and pushed on his chest. We only have an hour, she grumbled, but Michael saw her protest for what it was. 1 hour to bring their people to the lower docks. 1 hour to hold the scorpions. 1 hour for the fleeing marks to return to the town and gain safety. I'll recall them, he said. I don't want to risk leaving them behind. The scorpions won't follow them anyway, Michelle said. They haven't for months. That might buy us more time. If the marks head for the town, maybe the scorpions will look toward the rim or swing for the river. She had a point. Let's see what the discs are doing. They checked the discs leading the villagers. Both were intact, the lead disc keeping to a pace the caravan could follow, the backup disc flying high and dark, tracking the enemy and the progress of the caravan below. Michael widened its scan and stayed tapped in. He'd be able to keep an eye on the villagers' progress while he checked in with the discs harrying the scorpions engaging the marks. Two of the attack discs were down, but Sun's mark had almost broken free. Michael felt a sense of grim satisfaction at the sight of the scorpion bodies littering the sands mined by the runners. He found Simeon heading south. Turn to the town, he ordered. You know they don't follow us anymore. He felt Simeon's acknowledgement, heard the order being issued. Hurry. You have 3/4 of the hour before the evacuation begins. I have the lions, Simeon replied. I will bring them too. Good work. The battle must have been very close indeed if the sun's mark had been driven close enough to the lions to amalgamate. Michael wished the wind would answer so he could see their position. Instead, he lifted one of the discs at his feet, activating it with his fingers and accepting the sharp click of contact when it extended a thin metal tube to the junction point in his temple. He ordered it to fly high and dark, scanning the fleeing marks and their surroundings. He ordered it to overfly the ridge and outskirts of town on its way out so he could see what the raiders were doing there. When it had downloaded his instructions, he released it through the office window. Michelle was waiting for his orders when he was done. Hearing more gunfire from the ridge and seeing muzzle flashes in the scan from the disc overflying the villages, Michael touched his daughter's mind and sent her the battle plans for the discs at their feet. Her eyes widened, but Michael saw her turn inward, running the alternatives and finding nothing better. At last she nodded, activating the first disc. Seeing the machine dock with the junction point in Michelle's skull, Michael turned to the first of the sand runners. He could program them to mine the ridge and the outskirts of the town. With a timer to delay them until just after the villagers had passed, the runners would lay their mines in time to halt the Scorpion's advance. If the villagers were delayed, Michael shuddered, hesitated, added a kill code to recall the runners for fresh orders. He hoped he wouldn't regret it. Tapping into the disc overflying the villages, Michael saw the Hawkmark outriders approaching the ridge. He tapped the disc he'd sent to monitor what was left of the sun and lion marks and saw a ragged line of men staggering toward the uppermost section of the town. Simeon answered the moment he linked in. Defender? Is the river still dry? Yes, Defender. Follow the riverbed to the lower dock. Caroline will meet you there. The caravan? Exhaustion crept along the edges of Simeon's contact. Shell and I have them covered. We'll meet you at the lower docks. Michael linked out before the Mark commander could protest. It was up to Simeon to bring what was left of the Lion and Sun marks home. He looked across at his daughter as a rattle of gunfire signaled the Hawk mark's first contact with the raiders. Ready? She waited until the last disc had disengaged from her head and nodded. Then set them loose. Michelle pulled back the window blinds and slid the glass panel aside. With a blink of her eyes, she gave the order, and the last 12 discs rose from the floor. Small but powerful propulsion systems kicked in, and they zipped out into the night. Michelle scooped her rifle from where it rested against the wall and followed her father out into the night. Michael linked to the headman. Head straight into town. Order Hawkmark not to engage or deviate from a direct run to the town. Any who do will die. The discs can't differentiate. You can't. Headman, I already have. Michael cut the link, cutting off the headman's angry response. He relinked with one more instruction. Shell and I will meet you on the edge of town. Defender, people are going to die. I'm sorry, it cannot be undone. He led his daughter through the town, using the ruins to cover their approach to the edge of the scree. Using short hand movements and a rapid uplink to signal her to take position, he tried to reach the Hawk's Mark commander. Above them, discs hovered temporarily leashed until Shell gave the final order. Head straight into town. Shell and I will cover you. When we reach our positions, you can cover the caravan. But run, Commander. Michael repeated the command, reinforcing it with a mental image of the route to his position and slamming the battle plan into the man's mind as hard as he dared. Run! He broke away from the Hawk commander and touched Michelle's mind. Go. She unleashed the discs and settled into cover, scanning the ridge for her first target. Michael activated the last of his powers. It was short range, but allowed him to scan all the allies inside a 30-foot radius, mapping them across a grid of known terrain if one was available. All else was shadow. Shell had taken up a position similar to his own, in a second-floor room overlooking the steep slope which provided the only viable access into one of the town's main streets. Mimicking her action, Michael settled to scan the slope for a target of his own. Above them, the discs began to strafe any living thing not moving toward the route into town. Just beyond the crown of the ridge, a 5-man team of raiders avoided the first deadly overflight by racing toward the scree slope. Michael took down the first 2, but Michelle's reflexes were faster and she finished the other 3. The next team of raiders missed the initial strafing run, only to be caught by the second as they set an ambush just under the ridge's skyline. 8 of the Hawk Mark fell to their defenders' plans. They refused the orders to break from combat or embark on a fighting retreat. 2 continued pursuing raiders into the desert. 3 chose to stand and hold against a greater force instead of falling back before it. and 3 others stood still to shepherd the convoy forward instead of moving with it. The discs struck with precision and a deadliness that did not discriminate. Any who stopped to watch them became victims. All who did not move toward the town died within seconds. 12 villagers lost their lives before the message got through. Move toward town if you want to live. Michael could not have chosen a more effective way of getting them to obey. As he and Michelle waited for the villagers to reach them, they took out any raiders trying to get ahead of the caravan. The villagers weren't the only ones to get the message. More than a few of the surviving scorpions saw and understood the disc's pattern of death. They fled toward the town. Real bullets were more deterrent to them than the rumors of some crazy woman's ghost. At the sight of the first Hawk's Mark's men crossing the ridge and half sliding, half running down the scree, Michael jerked his barrel up. The bullet he was about to fire fled in a wild arc into the sky. A second round went wild as Michelle mirrored his action. Michael signaled the Hawks men in, but instead of ordering them to take defensive positions along the town's edge, he gathered them before him. You need to secure the lower docks, he said, and make sure the road is clear. The Hawk commander stepped forward, rifle slung, fist cocked. Michael straightened, faced him down. There is no time. He had to make the time, dodging the first swing and driving a fist sharp and hard into the man's midriff. When the commander doubled, Michael set a boot against his shoulder and shoved him butt first into the dirt. Later, he said, don't make their deaths in vain. 2 of the man's remaining mark grabbed their commander, dragging him back even as they helped him to his feet. Later, the man snapped, shaking himself loose. Turning to his men, he barked the orders to get them moving and headed further into town, his men in tow. The caravan appeared not long after Michael had resumed his second-floor position. This time, he did not let them stop. Signaling to Michelle to join him as the trucks and jeeps jolted carefully down the scree, he jogged into the street ahead of the lead vehicle. Headmen, follow us, he ordered, afraid that if he let the caravan come to a halt, they would not reach Caroline in time. As it was, she would soon complete the ceremony of opening, and he did not want to miss the rendezvous. They had lost 10 years already. Wait, the headman said, then out loud, wait! Michael ignored him, jogging ahead of the caravan down the wider streets, trying to pick the route easiest for the vehicles to negotiate. Caroline was waiting. He'd almost forgotten the sandrunners when the first of them skittered past him toward the hill. Headman, tell your people to get off that hill. Tell them now, he demanded, stopping to send an image of the sandrunner across the link. From the back of the caravan came a startled shout and the sound of sudden hard acceleration. Michael tensed, waiting for the sound of an explosion that did not come. More sandrunners scuttled past him, mandibles clacking in warning at any of the villagers who came too close. Down the center of their segmented backs ran 2 rows of pulsing light, red, blue, and yellow. The lines formed a trio of parallel ribbons leading from the sandrunners' tails to where they divided at the skull and ran individually to the tip of each antenna. Their multifaceted sensor arrays, usually a midnight black in the light of day, glowed a dull cherry red in the gathering dusk. Most people stepped away from them as they approached. Knowing his people were clear of the runners and the slope, Michael turned and began jogging toward the lower docks. Behind them, under the shale and sand of the ridge overlooking the town, the sand runners laid their mines, creating a barrier the scorpions would not be able to pass without cost. As Michael jogged, he linked to the Hawkmark leader. Route? We're clearing it as we go. The commander sent him a map of the path they'd taken. To Michael's relief, it was the route he had chosen. He studied it, looked for a faster route, and found none. Good work, Commander. He rounded a corner and patched through to Simeon. Report, he ordered.